Let's move on to preserving your sex life. There's a stereotype of older adults as asexual, which is ageist and inaccurate. Sex is a valued part of our full adult lives, as evidenced by the fact that the vast majority, 85%, of surveyed nursing homes report residents engaging in sex acts. However, sexual activity does tend to decline with age, though some blue zone nonagenarians continue to be able to quote-unquote honestly vouch for their active sex lives. A national U.S. survey of thousands of older adults found a progressive decline in sexual activity with age from 73% of people between the ages of 57 and 64 down to just 26% of those aged 75 to 85. Of that 26%, most, 54%, had intercourse 2 to 3 times a month, but 23% had sex at least once a week. The drop in sexual activity may be less to do with age per se and more to do with declining health. The number one reason given for lack of sexual activity among older adults was their or their partner's physical health problems or limitations. This implies that general body upkeep can help keep people actively engaged in all life has to offer, but approximately half of older men and women report specific issues, most often low sexual desire in women and erectile difficulties in men. Although only a minority appeared distressed by their sexual problems, sexual dysfunction can be a canary in the coal mine for broader health issues. In a study in which more than 2,000 men and women were followed for about 6 years, those with a higher frequency of sexual activity had a significantly lower risk of dying. Those having sex 52 times or more a year, approximately weekly, seemed to have only half the mortality rate compared to those having sex once or less a year, even after controlling for physical activity and health conditions, such as obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease. Even though sexual activity may just be an indicator of general health, it might also have protective physical and mental health benefits. For example, endorphins, feel-good chemicals released during sex, have been shown to improve natural killer cell function. Researchers suggest that the reduction in premature death risk may be because sex is a form of exercise, but people may overestimate their exertions in bed. One of the quote-unquote 7 myths about obesity, identified in the New England Journal of Medicine, is that a bout of sexual activity burns a few hundred calories. So you may think, hey, I could have a side of fries with that. If you hook people up, literally and figuratively, and actually measure their oxygen consumption during the act, assuming they don't get too tangled up in all the wires and hoses, having sex only turns out to be the metabolic equivalent of bowling. The average bout of sexual activity may only last about 6 minutes, and a young man might expend approximately 21 calories during intercourse. Because of baseline metabolic needs, he would have spent roughly 1/3 of that just lounging around watching TV, so the incremental benefit is plausibly on the order of 15 calories, so maybe he can have 1 fry with that. Whether a cause or consequence of ill health, sexual difficulties can be improved with lifestyle changes. Smoking cessation, exercise, and a healthier diet, for example higher fruit and vegetable intake, have been associated with lower risk of both male and female sexual dysfunction. An interventional trial randomizing diabetic men and women to a more Mediterranean-type diet confirmed that dietary changes can slow the deterioration of sexual function in both sexes and cut the emergence of new sexual dysfunction in half. A sidebar: passing the sniff test. Love may be at first sight and beauty in the eye of the beholder, but vision is not the only sense associated with physical attractiveness and romantic partner preference. Body odor signals a variety of information on matters such as eating habits, hygiene, health, and more. In a survey of heterosexual college students, men rated visual information as being most important for selecting a lover, while women considered smell to be the single most important physical feature. In other words, women ranked body odor as more important for attraction than quote-unquote looks. Men may be more discriminating in this department than they think. For example, heterosexual men can unconsciously discriminate between body odor samples from pregnant women versus ovulating women. Functional MRI scans show that 2 different samples light up different areas of men's brains. How do postmenopausal women smell? What about older men? As we age, men and women both begin developing a distinctive body odor. The Japanese even have a name for it, kareju. It appears to be due to a chemical we start producing as early as age 40 called 2-nonenal, which has an unpleasant grassy and greasy odor caused by the oxidation of omega-7 fats that are increasingly exuded from our skin. What can we do to make ourselves smell better? Eat mushrooms. Researchers in Japan carried out a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial of 3 different doses of a champignon mushroom extract on the breath odor, pillow odor, pajama odor, and fecal odor of older men and women. Testers sniffed for bad breath one hand's breath away from the study subjects' mouths as they talked for a minute or two, smelled their used pillowcases and pajamas, and evaluated their fecal odor. The, quote, cooperating person evaluated the smell after the subject used the toilet, unquote. Every dose of the mushroom extract beat out placebo for every test. Within 2 to 4 weeks, the mushrooms improved the smell of the participants' breath, bedding, clothing, and poop. I had never heard of champignon mushrooms. Would they have to be ordered from some rare and exotic mushroom shop? I was pleasantly surprised to learn that champignon is just another name for regular white button mushrooms, the cheapest, easiest to find mushrooms you can get just about anywhere. To pit it against placebo, the researchers had to use an extract they could stuff into a capsule. They didn't describe the extraction process, but if it were just dried mushroom powder, the biggest dose they used would only translate into about a single small mushroom a day. What else can we try? In my video c.nf/body odor, I show how eating chlorophyll can help, reducing underarm odor at doses on the order of 100 milligrams a day, the amount of chlorophyll you could get in about a dozen leaves of spinach. So, before slathering aluminum onto your armpits, I recommend first trying to deodorize from the inside out by eating a big salad every day, which may improve your body odor 2 ways, by hitting the chlorophyll threshold and improving your health. As I explore in the video, the induction of inflammation with injections of endotoxin gives people an aversive body odor compared to those getting placebo injections. So, does eating meat make people smelly? If you remember, I talked about how endotoxins are found in meat. The Kareshu elderly person smell is thought to arise in part from, quote, high animal fat containing modern diets, unquote. But there's only one way to find out. Czech researchers decided to put it to the test, publishing their results in, quote, the effect of meat consumption on body odor attractiveness, unquote. Not just body odor, mind you, but body odor attractiveness. For 2 weeks, male quote-unquote odor donors were placed on a diet that either included or excluded meat, and during the final 24 hours had pads taped into their armpits to collect their body odor. Then 30 women assessed quote-unquote fresh odor samples hot off the pits for their pleasantness, attractiveness, masculinity, and intensity. A month later, the study was repeated with the same men, but this time they followed the opposite diet. The same women were used as judges. The men, incidentally, were paid $2,000 in Czech currency for their time and quote-unquote potential inconvenience caused by the prescribed diet. And the women who had to sniff all those armpit pads, they were not paid, though they did receive a chocolate bar for their participation. So, whose body odor was the most pleasant, the most attractive? The results showed that, quote, the odor of donors when on the non-meat diet was judged as significantly more attractive, more pleasant, and less intense, unquote, and no differences were noted for masculinity. The researchers concluded that meat may have a, quote, negative impact on perceived body odor hedonicity, unquote. In other words, those eating more plant-based evidently smell perceptively more pleasurable. Female sexual function. The most frequently reported sexual symptoms among older women is low libido, followed by poor lubrication and pain during intercourse. Though there are safe natural solutions, Big Pharma has money-grabbed women's privates. Medicalizing women's libido. In a textbook case of disease-mongering, the pharmaceutical industry has promoted female sexual dysfunction as a mental disorder, harkening back to the first edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, Psychiatry's Diagnosis Manual, which listed frigidity as a mental disorder, along with homosexuality. The latest manifestation is quote-unquote hypoactive sexual desire disorder, a disease invented by drug companies. There are certainly women troubled by low libido, but that doesn't make it a medical condition. In fact, even women with a normal libido can get diagnosed with hypoactive sexual desire disorder. Quote, a woman who is highly interested in sex, just not with her current partner, can still qualify for a diagnosis, unquote. And the drug. Even a, quote, woman who is happy with her sex life may still qualify for a diagnosis of hypoactive sexual desire disorder if her partner is dissatisfied, unquote. I review the shameful saga of the approval of flibanserin sold as Adyi in my video c.nf/hsdd. Clinical benefits are marginal and the side effects significant. Combining with alcohol, for example, can cause dangerously low blood pressure and fainting, problems so serious that the FDA put a black box warning, its most serious safety alert, on the drug insert hardly anyone reads. So even without alcohol, it can cause severe drops in blood pressure and quote-unquote sudden, prolonged unconsciousness. As pharmacology professor Adrian Feuerberman put it, these types of serious side effects, quote, might be acceptable in a cancer drug, but they are entirely unacceptable in a drug given to healthy women for an invented condition, unquote. Get your juices flowing. Eating more healthfully can extend not only your life, but also your love life. Generally speaking, heart-healthy lifestyle changes are sex-healthy lifestyle changes because of the critical role blood flow plays in the sexual responses of both men and women. For example, researchers can use MRI techniques to measure clitoral engorgement within minutes of exposure to an erotic video. This helps explain why sexual function in women is significantly affected by the presence of vascular diseases caused by the atherosclerotic narrowing of blood flow and arterial dysfunction. Rabbits made atherosclerotic by being fed dietary cholesterol suffer a decrease in induced clitoral erections. Yes, all female mammals have clitorises, as do some birds and reptiles. Cholesterol doesn't just build up inside the arteries that feed our heart muscle, but inside all our blood vessels. In the heart, atherosclerosis can cause a heart attack, and in the brain it can cause a stroke. In our legs, it can cause peripheral vascular disease and result in debilitating cramping. And in our vertebral arteries, it may cause disc degeneration and lower back pain. And clogs in our pelvic arteries can lead to sexual dysfunction, including decreased vaginal engorgement and quote-unquote clitoral erectile insufficiency syndrome, defined as a, quote, failure to achieve clitoral tumescence, unquote, or engorgement. This is thought to be an important factor in female sexual dysfunction. Women with higher cholesterol levels report significantly lower arousal, orgasm, lubrication, and sexual satisfaction. The same appears to be true for women with high blood pressure. The Framingham Risk Score incorporates both cholesterol and blood pressure, and women with a score indicating even a 2% 10-year risk of developing heart disease have nearly twice the risk of sexual dysfunction. No wonder women randomized to a plant-based diet experienced a significant improvement in overall sexual function. Lubrication is all about blood flow, too. The hydrostatic pressure from all the additional pelvic blood flow in a sexually aroused vagina forces fluid to leak onto the surface wall of the birth canal as vaginal lubrication. How can we improve blood flow? If you remember from my Preserving Your Mind chapter, the flavonoid phytonutrients in cocoa can help open up arteries, peaking at about 90 minutes after consumption. So might that Valentine's Day chocolate make a difference? Women who eat chocolate were found to have higher female sexual function index scores, but the effect disappeared once age was taken into account. So chocolate appeared to flop as an aphrodisiac, perhaps because its fat and sugar counteract the benefits of the flavonoids in straight cocoa powder. What about some whole food sources of flavonoids? Onions are a major source. Quote-unquote fresh onion juice was found to enhance copulatory behavior in rodents. For those of us less interested in how to, quote-unquote, increase the percentage of ejaculating rats, and looking for something other than onion juice for our hot date, Apples are the next largest source of flavonoid intake in the United States. A study out of Italy found that women who ate apples on a daily basis scored significantly higher on an index of overall sexual function than women consuming less than an apple a day. Note that the researchers only counted women who ate unpeeled apples because the phytonutrients are concentrated in the peel, so we don't know if there's a link with peeled apples. Either way, as an observational study, all that could be demonstrated is a correlation between apple eating and improved sexual function. If proven to be cause and effect, the research suggests this could lead to, quote, identifying new compounds and food supplements to use in female sexual recovery, unquote. Or you can just try eating an apple. Shot down in flames. Women randomized to an increased intake of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and beans with a shift from animal to plant sources of fat experienced a significant increase in sexual function. The same was found for men and erectile function. The largest study on diet and erectile dysfunction found that each additional daily serving of fruits and vegetables may reduce the risk of ED by 10%. This could be due to increased circulation as well as decreased inflammation. A review on inflammation and sexual dysfunction concluded that men and women should switch to a diet high in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds, and low in sodium and saturated fat. As I reviewed in the inflammation chapter, fiber is the most anti-inflammatory dietary component, and saturated fat the most pro-inflammatory one. A 2-year interventional study found that a significant improvement in the sexual function of men and women randomized to a healthier diet also noted a significant reduction in levels of C-reactive protein, a marker of systemic inflammation. Even the same diet in smaller portions can help. Overweight diabetic women with sexual dysfunction randomized around a 15-pound weight loss through portion control over a year, which is enough to drop C-reactive protein levels by about 40%, were more than twice as likely to regain normal sexual function. You don't have to wait a whole year, though. Changes in inflammation in the blood can occur hour to hour based on what you just ate. Researchers fed subjects sausage, egg, butter, oil sandwiches versus cheeseless pizza with whole wheat crust. There's a pro-inflammatory signaling molecule in our body called interleukin-18, which is thought to play a role in destabilizing atherosclerotic plaque. As such, the level of interleukin-18 in the blood is a strong predictor of cardiovascular death. Within hours of eating the sausage sandwich, interleukin-18 levels rose about 20%. In contrast, those eating the whole food plant-based pizza had a 20% drop in interleukin-18 levels within hours of consumption, reinforcing dietary recommendations to eat a diet high in fiber and low in saturated fat. But the billions in profits are in pills, not plants, which is why the pharmacology of the female orgasm has been studied ever since 1960, when a researcher at Tulane University implanted tubes deep within the brain of a woman, quote-unquote, of borderline defective intelligence, so he could inject drugs directly into her brain to induce repetitive orgasms. A man who had electrodes placed in similar parts of his brain was given a device for a few hours that allowed him to press the button himself to stimulate the electrode. He pressed the button 1,500 times. A sidebar: toying with phthalates. Phthalates are hormone-disrupting chemicals found in PVC plastics linked to a number of adverse health effects such as disturbing infant and child genital and behavioral development. Data has shown, for example, incomplete virilization in infant boys and reduced masculine play as they grow up, and for girls, an earlier onset of puberty. In adults, phthalates can affect our sex lives, as I explore in c.nf/phthalates, which is spelled PHTHALATES. In addition to increasing breast cancer risk, they may impair testosterone production in men and decrease libido in women. Most phthalates come from food, based on fasting studies, but we can get similar drops from simply eating a plant-based diet for a few days. The highest levels are found in meats, fats, and dairy. Poultry consistently comes out as being the most contaminated across the board, with some of the highest levels ever reported. Diets high in meat and dairy may exceed the allowable daily intake set by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. Even during total fasting, a few cases of phthalate urine spikes were noted after showers, suggesting contamination in personal care products. This may be avoided by choosing unscented products, since phthalates are used as a fragrance carrier. Certain phthalate levels are now banned from children's toys, but not from toys for adults. So-called jelly-based sex toys are often made from a plasticized vinyl material loaded with phthalates. Although opting for water-based lubricants may reduce phthalate transfer 100-fold, such sex toys may have opposite the intended effect. Testosterone so-called replacement for women. Testosterone is linked with sexual desire in both men and women. Women normally produce testosterone throughout the life cycle. Although postmenopausal ovaries continue to produce testosterone, levels naturally decline with age, falling by approximately 50% by age 50. This is thought to play a role in the decline in libido, using masturbation frequency as a partner-independent proxy. A syndrome of quote-unquote female androgen deficiency symptoms has been popularized, but there's no evidence that testosterone so-called replacement helps with mood, well-being, or hot flashes, nor bone, cardiovascular, or metabolic health. The only evidence-based reason to try testosterone in postmenopausal women is for the treatment of low sexual desire that's causing distress, though as I detailed in c.nf/T for women, that's T, the numeral for women, efficacy is insufficient to warrant FDA approval, especially given the uncertainty about long-term side effects. DHEA, which can convert into testosterone within the body, fails to significantly improve desire and sexual function, but natural ways to raise testosterone levels in women are listening to music and avoiding mint tea. A sidebar smell to high heaven. What else can older women do to improve their sexual desire if they so choose? There are 2 aromatherapy regimens that may help. Women randomized to smell the aroma of lavender for 20 minutes twice a day for 12 weeks experienced a significant improvement in menopausal symptoms, including sexual desire, compared to sniffing the control, which was diluted milk. Neroli oil, also known as bitter orange, appeared to work even faster. Just 5 minutes twice a day for 5 days led to a significant increase in sexual desire, even just a 0.1% concentration of the essential oil, compared to instead sniffing the carrier almond oil alone. It's hard to rule out placebo effects since the controls were not matched for intensity. A better research design might have incorporated synthetic fragrances, but they still may be worth a try. The roots of the matter: ginseng, maca, and ashwagandha. What about other dietary supplements such as 3 roots, ginseng, maca, and ashwagandha? For details, check out c.nf/roots. But essentially, ginseng flopped for female sexual dysfunction, though one small trial of about 3/4 of a teaspoon of maca powder suggested benefit. Ashwagandha, from ashwa meaning horse and gandha meaning smell, because the roots evidently possess the quote-unquote distinctive smell of a wet horse, may also help, but cannot be recommended due to rare cases of liver toxicity. What else should we expect from a plant with the nickname poison gooseberry? Vaginal moisturizers. Typically starting about 4 to 5 years after their last period, about half of postmenopausal women suffer from what they used to call vulvovaginal atrophy, but now referred to by the name genitourinary syndrome of menopause, or GSM. The Vulvovaginal Atrophy Terminology Consensus Conference panel of the North American Menopause Society decided that the term GSM was more quote-unquote publicly acceptable. Not that the original descriptor wasn't accurate, but the panel felt that the word atrophy had quote-unquote negative connotations, and the word vagina was, quote, not a generally accepted term for public discourse or for the media, unquote. The panel likened it to the parallel shift from the quote-unquote pejorative impotence to erectile dysfunction. Whatever it's called, it involves changes to the vulva, the external genitalia, vagina, birth canal, and bladder, caused by menopausal changes in hormone levels. Symptoms include vaginal dryness, burning, itchiness, and irritation, pain during penetrative sex, and postcoital bleeding from the thinning of the vaginal lining. Urinary symptoms can include recurrent bladder infections and incontinence. Some women with mild GSM remain asymptomatic. For others, symptom severity can preclude intercourse and result in discomfort even with just sitting or wiping. In a survey of thousands of women with GSM, 59% said their symptoms, quote, considerably decreased their enjoyment of sexual activity, unquote, and 23% reported that it had an adverse effect on, quote, general enjoyment of life, unquote. While other menopausal symptoms tend to improve over time, like hot flashes, GSM symptoms tend to get progressively worse. Women rarely seek medical help, which is unfortunate since there are safe and simple treatments available. The first-line treatment for mild to moderate vaginal dryness are lubricants and moisturizers. Lubricants are designed to reduce friction during sexual activity, whereas vaginal moisturizers are used on a regular basis, either daily or every 2 or 3 days as needed, to provide comfort by mimicking normal vaginal secretions regardless of sexual activity. Water-based lubricants have the advantage of being non-staining and are associated with fewer genital symptoms, such as discomfort or burning, compared to silicone-based lubricants. What's the best vaginal moisturizer? A head-to-head study pitted Replens, an expensive vaginal moisturizer claiming special quote-unquote bioadhesive ingredients, versus a placebo gel of hydroxyethyl cellulose, which is found in products 10 times cheaper like KY jelly. After 12 weeks, the researchers found no difference between the two. This quote-unquote striking finding led to an accompanying commentary in the American Medical Association Journal to conclude that, until there's evidence to suggest otherwise, quote, postmenopausal women experiencing vulvovaginal symptoms should consider the cheapest moisturizer or lubricant available over the counter, unquote. There is another factor to take into account, though. The World Health Organization recommends, based on the SMI test, personal lubricants and vaginal moisturizers not exceed an osmolality of 380 milliosmoles per kilogram. That's a measure of how concentrated the dissolved components are. How did they come up with that number? By lubing up slugs. SMI stands for slug mucosal irritation. They cover slugs with lubricant over a 5-day period and measure how much mucosal irritation and tissue damage the slug experiences. No adverse effects were found below the cutoff, but a product like KY jelly at 2,463 milliosmoles induced mild to moderate irritation, and something off the charts like Astroglide at 5,848 caused severe irritation and tissue damage. Dozens of commonly used lubricants and moisturizers available worldwide have been put to the test, and the only 2 vaginal moisturizers that met the WHO criteria were the Ah Yes VM brand aloe vera gel-based moisturizer and the Balance Active brand's hyaluronic acid-based one. The only lubricants that made the cut were made by the brands Yes, Good Clean Love, and System Joe, as well as one product by Durex, Sensilube Gel, but not its Playfeel lubricant. Vaginal hormones. If over-the-counter lubricants and moisturizers are insufficient to control GSM symptoms, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and other professional societies recommend low-dose, local, meaning vaginal estrogen, unless there's a history of hormone-dependent cancers like endometrial or breast cancer. It's considered safer and more effective than systemic hormone therapy. A meta-analysis of 58 studies comparing vaginal to oral estrogens found that vaginal estrogen therapy offered better GSM symptom relief. Many women who are on systemic menopausal hormone therapy have to add on supplemental vaginal estrogens to control symptoms. Vaginal estrogens are available as a variety of creams, suppositories, and rings. 30 comparative trials have been performed, and there appears to be no difference in efficacy among the various preparations. However, they may take weeks before a noticeable alleviation of symptoms is detected, and 2 to 3 months before the full effect is achieved. Although a year-long study could clearly demonstrate vaginal estrogen's benefit, studies as long as 12 weeks have failed to manifest superiority to placebo. Estrogens applied to the vulva or vagina are systemically absorbed and convey the same black box FDA notice that oral estrogens carry, an all-caps warning of increased risk of endometrial cancer, cardiovascular disorders, breast cancer, and probable dementia. Vaginal estrogen is considered safer, though, since it can be used locally at much lower doses, as low as 1/100th the oral dose needed to relieve hot flashes, for example. The Harvard Nurses' Health Study didn't find any increased risks associated with vaginal estrogen use over 18 years of follow-up. Randomized controlled trials lasting up to a year appear to confirm its safety, but there have been observational studies linking vaginal use to about a doubling of risk of endometrial cancer. However, one was done back in the 1970s when higher estrogen doses were used, and the more recent study out of Denmark may have been confounded by concurrent oral estrogen exposure. Out of an abundance of caution, women who have survived hormone-dependent cancer should avoid even low-dose localized estrogen. Those women may want to consider vaginal DHEA instead, although oral DHEA doesn't appear to offer any benefit. In 2016, the FDA approved vaginal DHEA suppositories for pain during intercourse due to GSM. It's converted locally into estrogen and does not significantly affect systemic hormone levels. The downside is that it has to be administered nightly, whereas estrogen preparations are typically used twice a week and vaginal rings only every few months. For those who would rather have an oral treatment, there's ospemifene, a tamoxifen-type drug that has pro-estrogenic effects on the vaginal lining. However, it actually increases the rate of hot flashes and urinary tract infections in the short term, and insufficient data are available on long-term safety. Soy joy. Japanese-American women have the lowest rates of hot flashes in the United States, as well as the lowest rates of vaginal dryness. Might it be due in part to their greater soy consumption? There have been a few studies on topical application of soy isoflavone vaginal gels showing a significant improvement in dryness and pain with intercourse over placebo gels, roughly on par with estrogen cream in a head-to-head test. But it's unlikely that these women are applying soy products topically. A whole new meaning to the term extra firm tofu? What about just eating soy foods? Feeding isoflavones to older mice increases vaginal blood flow. What about in people? Most oral soy supplements flopped, but as I explained in c.nf/soygsm, the 3 studies on soy milk and GSM symptoms show promise. A case report out of New York suggests it may be possible to overdo it, though. A 44-year-old woman presented to her gynecologist with a, quote, increase in desire that required her to self-stimulate to orgasm approximately 15 times daily. A month before, she had started an almost exclusively soy-based diet, eating in excess of 4 pounds of soy foods a day. Within 3 months of cutting back, her desire cooled to the point that she, quote, engaged in satisfying sexual activity only twice daily, unquote. Fennel and fenugreek. Fennel seeds, which are actually whole little fruits, have been shown to have hormonal effects, for example, offering significant relief from painful periods, comparable to ibuprofen-type drugs. After menopause, fennel oil extract supplements didn't show any benefit for GSM symptoms, but whole fennel seeds, powdered into capsules to pit them against placebo in a double-blind controlled trial, significantly improved menopausal symptoms at a dose of just a teaspoon a day. Topical fennel creams are even more impressive. Within 8 weeks, about 90% of those randomized to a vaginal fennel cream went from experiencing severe pain during intercourse to none, whereas pain didn't go away in any of those on the placebo cream. Vaginal dryness, itching, and pallor also completely disappeared in the fennel group. These extraordinary results were recently replicated successfully. Other studies have also found significant benefits to fennel vaginal creams for desire, arousal, lubrication, orgasm, and sexual satisfaction. Fenugreek seeds are also hormonally active, as I document in c.nf/fenugreek. Men randomized to capsules containing fenugreek got significant gains in body composition and upper bench press and lower leg press strength compared to placebo, along with a significant boost in total blood testosterone and a doubling of the frequency of morning erections. And the only side effect? It can make your sweat and pee smell like maple syrup. Sounds like a bonus. What about sexual function in women? While the estrogen hormone estradiol stimulates vaginal lubrication and blood flow, facilitating a woman's capacity for sexual arousal and orgasm, it's the testosterone that's linked with sexual desire in both men and women. Fenugreek raises the levels of both estradiol and testosterone, resulting in an increase in sexual desire and function, translating to about a doubling of sexual activity compared to placebo. That was in premenopausal women, but the same dose was subsequently shown to improve sexual symptoms in postmenopausal women as well. However, it was not found to be as effective as estrogen cream in a head-to-head comparison. Male sexual function. Sex is important to health, reported the Harvard Health Letter, noting, quote, frequent sexual intercourse is associated with reduced heart attack risk, unquote. However, for men, this seems to be the perfect case for reverse causation. But low frequency of sexual activity appears to predict cardiovascular disease in men even independently of erectile dysfunction. Sex is kicking death in the ass while singing. Charles Bukowski. Do men who have more sex actually live longer? I reviewed the evidence in my video c.nf/sexlife, but in a nutshell, the researchers found that men with high orgasmic frequency appeared to cut the risk of premature death in half, and apparently the more the better. There is a 36% drop in mortality odds for every additional 100 orgasms a year, but apparently not if you cheat. Extramarital sex in men was associated with a higher cardiovascular risk for reasons laid out in the video. When done right, though, love may protect your lover's life. Given the purported benefits of sexual activity, the authors of the orgasm study suggested a public health initiative should be launched, similar to the at least 5 a day fruit and vegetable campaign aimed at increasing consumption of produce, though they acceded the numerical imperative may have to be adjusted. ED equals early death. Up to 30 million men in the United States and approximately 100 million men worldwide experience erectile dysfunction, or ED, the recurrent or persistent inability to attain or maintain an erection for satisfactory sexual performance. Hold on. The United States has less than 5% of the global population, yet up to 30% of the world's impotence? We're number one. ED is considered to be an important cause of decreased male quality of life, so much so that one early theory suggested that it may explain the link between impotence and heart attacks. Depression is a risk factor for coronary heart disease, and the thought was that men who couldn't get erections became so depressed that they die of a broken heart. The real reason the United States is the world leader in ED may be our artery-clogging standard American diet. 1 in 5 ED cases may be psychological in origin, but most are vasculogenic, meaning due to impaired penile blood flow. Every part of the body needs sufficient blood flow to function properly. Cholesterol can clog arteries in our inner and outer organs, causing aneurysms, heart attacks, strokes, kidney failure, spinal degeneration, and sexual dysfunction. Up to 3/4 of men with cholesterol-narrowed coronary arteries have some degree of erectile dysfunction. But Americans have red, white, and blue pills like Viagra. The problem is that those pills are just a stopgap measure to cover up the symptoms of vascular disease. They do nothing for the underlying pathology, the artery-clogging atherosclerosis that threatens one's life along with one's love life. Read my erectile dysfunction section in How Not to Die for further details, but basically men in their 40s with erection difficulties have up to 50-fold greater risk of having a cardiac event like sudden death. We used to think of ED in men under 40 as being psychogenic, all in their heads, but we are now realizing that the condition is more likely an early indicator of vascular disease. Over the age of 70, only a minority of men surveyed described being bothered by their ED, but they may not realize the broader implications for the health of their arteries. Some experts contend that a man with ED, even if he does not have any cardiac symptoms, should be treated as a cardiac patient until proven otherwise. Survival of the firmest. Given the underlying cause of physiological erectile difficulty, it's no surprise that an artery-healthy diet may be the cornerstone to prevent it. In a 2022 Urology paper titled "Consumption of a Healthy Plant-Based Diet is Associated with a Decreased Risk of Erectile Dysfunction," researchers noted that the 500% increase in the number of Americans consuming a plant-based diet in recent years may be accompanied by an improvement in male sexual function. Note that this was apparent only with the consumption of healthy plant foods, just cutting down on animal products, but continuing to down soda with your french fries would not be expected to improve matters in the bedroom. Whole plants for swole pants. This is consistent with findings from the Harvard Health Professionals follow-up study that followed more than 20,000 men for a little over a decade, from the average age of 62 until 73. The study found that those following healthier diets were significantly less likely to develop ED. A study of Canadian men with diabetes found that each additional daily serving of fruits and vegetables correlated with a 10% reduction in ED risk. This connection appears to extend to younger men, with fruit and vegetable consumption associated with lower ED risk even in men under 40. Erectile function may be such a sensitive indicator of cardiovascular health that it may explain why men lost the bone in their penis. I produced a video on the subject, c.nf/baculum, B-A-C-U-L-U-M. Without a bone, only genuinely healthy males could, quote-unquote, present a really stiff erection, evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins wrote, and the females could make an unobstructed diagnosis. A sidebar: bottling up your feelings. A recent study found that men eating organic foods tended to be less likely to have ED. Interest in the role of pesticides in sexual function dates back more than 50 years to a report titled "Impotence in Farm Workers Using Toxic Chemicals," published in the British Medical Journal. Agricultural workers frequently exposed to pesticides have up to 8 times the odds of a quote-unquote flat erectile pattern, which is a lack of nocturnal erections, but it's not clear if there's any effect caused by the traces of pesticides left on conventional produce. The lower risk among organic consumers may be due to the fact that those eating organic also tend to eat less processed foods and more fresh foods. The plastics chemical BPA is associated with declining male sexual function, decreased sexual desire, more difficulty having an erection, lower ejaculation strength, and lower level of overall satisfaction with sex life. We inhale some from dust and absorb some through our skin when touching BPA-laden receipts. 90% of our exposure to BPA is from our diet. In c.nf/BPA, I describe ways to limit our exposure, reduce our use of polycarbonate plastics, which are usually labeled with recycle codes 3 or 7, and opt for fresh and frozen foods over canned goods, especially when it comes to tuna and condensed soups. If you do use plastics, don't microwave them, put them in the dishwasher, leave them in the sun or a hot car, or use them once they're scratched. Using glass, ceramic, or stainless steel containers may be even better, though, as it's not clear if BPA-free plastics like Tritan are any better. Soft pedaling it. There are other lifestyle behaviors that impact male sexual function. Smoking may almost double the risk of developing ED, and even secondhand smoke has been implicated. Experimentally, 5 of 6 dogs exposed to just 10 or so minutes of cigarette smoke could not achieve erections. It's hard to rigorously study smoking cessation because of frequent non-compliance, but successful quitters do show significantly improved erectile function. For example, in one 6-month study, 54% of men who quit smoking regained erectile function compared to 28% of persistent smokers. Cannabis use is also associated with ED. A meta-analysis capturing data from thousands of men found that the prevalence of ED in cannabis users, 69.1%, was about twice as high as non-users, 34.7%. Obesity can cause profound sexual dysfunction, which can be reversed with sufficient diet or surgery-induced weight loss. Physical inactivity may also cause sexual inactivity. while regular aerobic exercise can improve erectile function almost as much as the latest generation of Viagra-type drugs. At least 40 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic exercise 4 times per week for at least 6 months is recommended for ED recovery. However, caution must be exercised when it comes to prolonged cycling. In reference to the Scythians, a group of horse-riding people, Hippocrates wrote that, quote, "the great majority among them become impotent." What about pelotons and other modern steeds? There are 50 million cyclists in the United States alone, and there's a concern about the repeated compression of the pudendal nerves, which branch off the spine, loop down between the legs, then up into the genitals. At first glance, cyclists appear to have the same rate of ED as non-cyclists, but since cyclists tend to be younger, one has to adjust for age. Once you do that, effectively comparing same-age cyclists to non-cyclists, a systemic review and meta-analysis involving more than 3,000 cyclists found them to be at significantly higher risk. What about bicycle seats with a cutout in the middle to relieve perineal pressure? They may actually make things worse. The pudendal nerve and artery don't travel along the midline, but rather in Alcock's canals along either side, and the decreased sitting surface area of cutout saddles can aggravate rather than relieve the pressure. Cyclists using cutout saddles have up to 6 times the risk of ED, but this seems limited to those who experience concurrent perineal numbness. What can you do? The greatest pressure in the critical region comes from leaning forward. Cycling upright was found to result in 40% better penile oxygenation than cycling at a 60-degree angle leaning forward. You can also regularly switch to standing up on the pedals during prolonged rides. Viagra, a hard sell. Though cholesterol-lowering statin drugs have been shown to help with ED, the first-line treatment for medical management is the Viagra-type class of drugs known as phosphodiesterase type 5 inhibitors. They relax the muscle fibers in the penis that normally staunch the influx of blood. Until the quote-unquote lecture that changed sexual medicine, erections were thought to arise from the constriction of blood outflow rather than the expansion of blood inflow. The lecture, given by Professor Giles Brindley at the annual meeting of the American Urological Association in 1983, involved a visual aid. Before taking the podium, he injected his own penis with a muscle relaxer. Halfway through the lecture, to drive home his point, he proceeded not only to whip it out, but then to waddle and waggle down to the front row, pants around his knees, to offer further inspection. The organizers were, quote, not happy, as there were a fair number of wives in the audience, unquote. Viagra works through a similar mechanism in oral form, originally starting out as a failed chest pain drug with a serendipitous billion-dollar side effect. However, rates of discontinuation after about 1 or 2 years of use range from 32 to 69% in the United States, so about half of men decide that the cons outweigh the pros, due to ineffectiveness, cost, or side effects, the most serious of which is non-arteritic ischemic optic neuropathy, or NAION. As I detail in c.nf/NAION, it typically manifests as waking up blind with usually temporary but sometimes permanent loss of vision in one or rarely both eyes. For men who don't like drugs, there's always surgery, the implantation of penile prosthetics. Unbelievably, penile implant usage evidently dates back to the 16th century. Early experiments involved transplanting patients' rib cartilage, or even their actual rib, into their penis. The rib cage implants left men in a quote-unquote permanent erect state, but the quote-unquote Flexirod technology in the 1960s, which allowed men to keep their ribs intact, had a hinge in the middle so the device could be bent down in half for quote-unquote improved concealment. Of course, proper sizing is important. If the implants are too small, there can be drooping at the tip, leading to a SST deformity, which stands for supersonic transport deformity because of its quote-unquote resemblance to the nose of the Concorde jet. Overlong implants can also be a problem with the semi-rigid rods eroding through the glans or tip of the penis. Ouch. Now there are inflatable devices, and perhaps one day there will be quote-unquote expandable foams that respond to external magnetic fields, or metal mesh technology, quote, that could expand and retract in a cage-like fashion. Try getting that through airport security. A sidebar: getting under your skin. Of the half-dozen Viagra-type drugs presently on the market, sildenafil, Viagra itself, may have the greatest efficacy, but it also may have the highest rates of side effects. Acutely, it's remarkably safe. For instance, one man swallowed 65 tablets in a failed suicide attempt. However, now that Viagra has been around for more than 2 decades, some chronic effects may be cropping up. This includes glaucoma, one of the leading causes of blindness. It involves the degeneration of the optic nerve, and those using Viagra in the long term have up to nearly 10 times the odds of developing it. But it's cancer that has the medical community rethinking the safety of this class of drugs. I reviewed the evidence in my video c.nf/Viagra, but basically one of the ways melanoma becomes invasive is through a gene mutation that downregulates the enzyme phosphodiesterase 5. Which is what Viagra-type drugs do, perhaps helping to explain why those taking drugs like Viagra, Cialis, or Levitra do seem to be at significantly higher risk for this potentially deadly form of skin cancer. Getting stiffed. An analysis of internet-ordered Viagra found that only 18% were authentic. Some of the pills contained a variety of contaminants, such as commercial-grade paint, and other drugs, including amphetamines. On the flip side, quote-unquote natural sexual enhancement supplements are among the dietary supplements most tainted with pharmaceuticals. More than a dozen deaths have been attributed to taking sexual performance supplements laced with diabetes drugs that crashed dozens into hypoglycemic comas. Hold on, what about supplement manufacturers who say they have independent, third-party certification of purity? There is a practice called dry labbing, a dirty little secret of the supplements industry where quality assurance laboratories just rubber stamp fake documents. For a litany of other supplement industry malfeasance, check out c.nf/supplements. The story of BMPEA is a particularly egregious example, as documented by STAT, one of my favorite sources of medical journalism. A researcher at Harvard published a paper replicating prior research from the FDA detecting a designer amphetamine-like stimulant in various supplements sold in the United States. In response, one of the offenders, High-Tech Pharmaceuticals, the manufacturer of supplements with names like Black Widow and Yellow Scorpion, sued the Harvard researcher for libel, slander, and product disparagement, originally to the tune of $200 million in damages. The head of High-Tech openly admitted that he was, quote, hoping that we were able to silence this guy, unquote. While ultimately unsuccessful in court, High-Tech's lawsuit effectively sent a warning to other researchers. High-Tech's CEO is attributed as saying that he, quote, hopes that the long and costly legal battle will scare away other academics from investigating the supplement industry, unquote. A bone to pick with ED supplements. Are there any supplements that have been shown to work? I reviewed the available evidence in c.nf/ED pills. Vitamins A, B3, C, and E flopped, and studies on vitamins B6 and D for ED had no control group to rule out the placebo effect or even to document that they were superior to doing nothing. One of the most popular ingredients in sexual enhancement supplements, and one of the most extensively studied, is ginseng. A meta-analysis of a half-dozen randomized controlled trials found that 4 to 12 weeks of 1,800 to 3,000 milligrams a day of Korean red ginseng significantly improved erectile function compared to placebo. Of course, this is assuming there's actually ginseng in your quote-unquote ginseng. Testing the authenticity of more than 500 commercial ginseng products across a dozen countries and 6 continents, 24% were found to be adulterated. Some natural quote-unquote aphrodisiacs are considered too risky. These include yohimbine, Spanish fly, mad honey, and bufo toad, the latter of which has been banned by the FDA for its potential lethality. Death has also been attributed to yohimbine, though since it was purchased online, it may have been adulterated with other substances. Gym member. Currently, recommended treatments for ED do nothing to treat and reverse the underlying cause of the problem. Whether oral drugs, surgical penile implants, vacuum erection devices, intraurethral pee-hole suppositories, or intracavernosal into-the-shaft injections. While the American Neurological Association at least encourages physicians to inform patients about the importance of lifestyle change, the European Association of Urology guidelines go a step further, mandating that lifestyle changes must precede or accompany ED treatment, and for good reason. In c.nf/ED lifestyle, I detail interventional studies showing how effective exercise and healthy dietary changes can be in improving erectile function. A sidebar: the Atkins diet. Trouble keeping it up. Erectile dysfunction and heart disease can be two different manifestations of the exact same root problem: diseased arteries, inflamed, oxidized cholesterol, clogged blood vessels. Thankfully, atherosclerosis in both organs can be reversed with lifestyle changes that include anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, cholesterol-lowering foods. I profile an illustrative case report in my video c.nf/Atkins. The fellow started out pretty healthy, a 51-year-old man with decent cholesterol, no measurable coronary artery plaque, and a working penis. He went on the Atkins diet, lost a few pounds, and the ability to have an erection. Then he nearly died with a 99% blockage to his heart, before a return to a healthier diet was able to reopen blood flow throughout his body. I wrote a book about the diet nearly 20 years ago. The Atkins Corporation threatened to sue me, but I kind of won by default because it declared bankruptcy 6 months later. You can read the whole book, as well as my rather amusing back and forth with Atkins lawyers, at atkinsfacts.org. Nut up. Consumption of at least one serving of vegetables a day and more than 2 servings of nuts a week was associated with more than a 50% decrease in the probability of ED in a snapshot-in-time cross-sectional study. The first interventional nut study on ED was published in 2011. As I detail in c.nf/pistachios, men eating 3 or 4 handfuls of pistachios a day for just 3 weeks experienced a significant improvement in blood flow through the penis, accompanied by significantly firmer erections. But a 14-week randomized controlled trial of mixed nuts improved sperm counts and marginally increased orgasmic function and sexual desire, but had no effect on erectile function. As I note in c.nf/mixed nuts, the discrepancy is likely due to differences in study populations. The men in the pistachio study were in their 40s and 50s, already plagued with chronic ED, whereas the average age in the mixed nut group was 24 years old, so younger men may have started out with near maximum circulation, leaving them without much nut wiggle room. Just beat it. What about vegetables? As discussed, the nitric oxide that allows blood vessels to relax can also be made directly from the nitrates concentrated in vegetables, such as greens and beets. Attempts were made to try to apply nitrates topically on the penis in the form of a nitroglycerin gel normally used for chest pain, but it caused headaches in both the user and, unless used only under a condom, their partners. The benefits of vegetable nitrates may explain why eating greens is associated with not only reduced risks of heart disease, but also a longer lifespan, not to mention the potential for a veggie Viagra effect. You can see the list of top 10 sources in the accompanying PDF. That could explain the link between vegetable consumption and improved sexual function, and improved blood flow to the most important organ of the body, the brain. The only side effect of beating out your brain may be adding a little extra color to your life in the form of red stools and urine that is pretty in pink. Fruit-wise, pomegranate juice flopped, as you can check out in c.nf/pomegranate, but watermelon stood firm, c.nf/watermelon. Watermelon contains a compound called citrulline, which turns into arginine inside the body, Straight arginine can improve erectile function, but it can also cause gastrointestinal distress. 5 daily servings of red watermelon's worth, or that found in a single daily wedge of yellow watermelon, 1/16 of a modest-sized melon, can improve erection hardness. If this is news to you, it may be because the advertising budgets of drug companies like Pfizer, which rakes in billions of dollars annually from the sale of ED drugs, are about 1,000 times that of the entire budget of the National Watermelon Promotion Board. Posh spice. A half-dozen studies have found that the spice saffron beat out placebo or rivaled medications like Prozac in the treatment of depression. Maybe the red pigment crocin, since that alone, in a dose equivalent to about a half teaspoon of saffron a day, beat out placebo as an adjunct treatment, significantly decreasing symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety, and general psychological distress. If the spice works as well as the drugs, one could argue that the spice wins, since it doesn't cause sexual dysfunction in the majority of men and women like most prescribed antidepressants do. Popular SSRI drugs like Prozac, Paxil, and Zoloft cause adverse sexual side effects in about 70% of people taking them, which can persist even after stopping the drugs. Now that's depressing. Not only is this not a problem with saffron, the spice may even be able to treat antidepressant-induced sexual dysfunction in both men and women, as documented in c.nf/crocin, spelled C-R-O-C-I-N. What about saffron for just regular ED? It was actually a saffron trial that inspired me to suggest the quote-unquote Rigiscan engorgement measuring device for use in the documentary The Game Changers. A suggestive benefit for both oral and topical, rubbed on the penis, saffron was found, with caveats summarized in my video c.nf/saffroned. A sidebar: costs versus benefits. A review on diet and sexual health expounded on the pros and cons of various eating patterns. The benefits of continuing to eat the standard American diet were, quote, relatively affordable and easy to obtain. And the downsides were increases of total mortality, cardiovascular disease, obesity, metabolic syndrome, stroke, chronic kidney disease, and breast, colon, and prostate cancer. Thankfully, eating more healthfully is becoming more and more convenient and may be among the cheapest ways to eat. A meat-free diet, for example, could save individuals an estimated $750 a year.